Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Mr. Long Island's Search for Truth and Beauty, where we look to discuss issues that Long Island needs to discuss, the truth that we need to hear, and also we explore the beauty that makes Long Island so special. My name is Michael Watt, A.K.A. Mr. Long Island, and my guest this afternoon is MC Nav. MC has written a cookbook called Gluten Free My Recipe. We're going to talk all about nutrition and gluten-free cooking and gluten-free food purchases. I'm very excited about that. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of gluten-free cooking, if you don't mind, one of the weekly features we do on Mr. Long Island's Search for Truth and Beauty is we like to discuss pizza. Because pizza is the one common denominator amongst every town on Long Island, and Long Islanders have very strong opinions about where to find good pizza. And the parameters for the best pizza on Long Island is where would you bring people from out of town if you really wanted to show off the region. Now, because of your background and your knowledge of gluten-free cooking and food purchasing, your idea of the best place to get pizza on Long Island might be a little different from everywhere else. So why don't you walk us through, where would you get pizza on Long Island?
Well, I've been from all over the island. Right now I'm living in Levittown, so there's a place called Portofino.
Okay.
When I first moved there, a person took me over, a friend of mine took me over there. They have gluten-free crust, gluten-free pastas, so that's a great place to go. They also have regular pizza, that's a penny alla vodka slice, that's great if you're not following a gluten-free diet. And then where I normally go personally is a place called Skinny Pizza, and it's in Roosevelt Field Mall. I think there's a few other chains around the area.
Okay.
So they have gluten-free crust, gluten-free pastas and sauces, and all organic.
The place in Levittown is called?
Portofino.
Portofino, where in Levittown is it?
It's on Hempstead Turnpike.
On Hempstead Turnpike, and the one in Roosevelt Field?
That's in Garden City, inside the mall.
Inside the mall, what was the name? Oh, Skinny Pizza.
Skinny Pizza.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
All right, so we got that out of the way. That's great, and it's very encouraging to know that you can get gluten-free pizza. I'm assuming it's good pizza, or
you can, yeah.
Okay.
You just have to be careful with cross-contamination. That's something that I'm always careful about, because you see a lot of places popping up with things like Domino's even has a gluten-free pizza now, but you don't know how well prepared they are, and the workers working there know how important it is to keep away gluten products from the gluten-free products.
And that's what you mean by cross-contamination.
Right.
It's sort of like keeping kosher.
Yeah, exactly,
Okay. All right.
exactly.
We'll get a little ahead of ourselves, though. Let's go back. Your book is called Gluten Free My Recipe.
Right.
MC Nav, N-A-V, right?
Yep, Nav.
Nav.
Yeah.
There you go. I put an E at the end. My bad.
No problem.
Walk us through a little bit. What is gluten and why is it so bad? And just tell us a little bit about how you came to know all you know about pizza. Gluten-free cooking.
Well, gluten is basically a protein found primarily in wheat, barley, rye products, and contaminated oats. Regular oats themselves are...
It's found naturally?
Yeah, it's a protein found in those grains. It's found in oats sometimes because most oats are produced in facilities and factories that actually produce other wheat products. So you'll find that there's cross-contamination there. So I got into gluten-free myself because I had a few problems with, I have IBS and spastic colon, I'm lactose intolerant, and a friend of mine came to me and she goes, I just went on this gluten-free diet, I feel 100 times better. I just eliminated the gluten from my diet, and I'm like, what's gluten? What are you talking about? I just think
How long ago was this?
This was about 2 years ago now. So I started out slow, and I would go and I would get the gluten-free cookie over the regular one, or have gluten-free pasta over regular. But I really wasn't fully gluten-free and didn't realize how hidden it is in our food, and you don't even realize.
Okay.
So
when you say hidden, is it listed as an ingredient, or is it?
Yeah, you're never really going to see gluten on the ingredient list. It'll be something more like wheat or bulgur, farro, udon. The list goes on and on. So if you look at
a food product, a processed food product, which I think is an important distinction, and you don't see gluten, that doesn't mean it's gluten-free.
No, not necessarily. But it will say on there, just like some things that contain milk, it'll say contains milk. This will say contains wheat.
Right.
So the FDA is doing a lot strides towards getting some more labeling rules into effect that will say gluten-free, and it will have to be certified gluten-free.
So you had these medical issues. I'm sure they were very frustrating, and you're trying to figure out ways around them, and hopefully more naturally than than taking pharmaceuticals or drugs or. And you had a conversation with a friend, and she told you about gluten-free products and or the role that gluten might be playing with your medical issues.
Yeah. And then on top of that, my mother actually was diagnosed with Lyme disease, and her doctor was very adamant about a gluten-free diet,
Okay.
sugar-free diet, and how the wheat itself could be affecting the Lyme disease in her and making it grow. So all this kind of happened around the same time, and gluten was becoming into, it was getting a hot button issue. So I decided to try it out and went on from there.
Okay, now gluten, is it something that's always been around and we're just now becoming aware of it, or
Yeah.
is it something that's been added recently for whatever reason?
No, it's always been in wheat, but
Okay.
the difference between wheat of 20 years ago and the wheat of today is very different.
How so?
It's just processed, over-processed,
Okay.
and they've made. I was reading this book. There's a few books out there about it. Grain Brain for one, Wheat Belly, Eat the Yolks. It talks about just how the processing of wheat has changed so drastically from years ago to make it better, to make it more economical, to make more products, to make
It more of a cost-efficient process,
Cost-efficient,
perhaps
yeah.
at the expense of.
at the expense of it being healthy or not.
Okay.
So.
All right. So it is a fairly recent. 20 years to you isn't as recent as 20 years to me, but it is a fairly recent development.
Yeah.
Because I mean, growing up, I never heard of any of this stuff. But as you get older and you're eating things and you have different kinds of reactions than you used to, you're wondering what's going on. And I saw a press release for a product that's sold on counters in convenience stores, and one of the selling points was the shelf life is 60 days once it's thawed. And I was like, wow. I don't want to eat anything that can stick around for 60 days.
Yeah,
It's very scary.
that is scary.
Yeah.
I wonder what was in that.
I don't want to know, and I'll never know. So okay, so you started looking into gluten, and if you don't mind, just pick us up from there.
Okay, yeah, so I started to look into gluten, and I started to just make my own recipes. I had a lot. I always cook, every once in a while. I'm not saying that I was, a great chef or anything, but I would like to cook for my friends and for family parties, and I took those recipes I had and was starting to adapt them into healthier gluten-free options. I say like healthy gluten-free because people normally say, oh, if it says gluten-free on it, it's automatically healthy for you, but I don't agree. I try to make them healthy and make healthy swaps and make it gluten-free at the same time.
Well, let's talk about that. You're drinking soda, which you shouldn't do, and you're worried about your sugar, so you see sugar-free soda. I was like, well, then it's better. A real good example, New York City a couple of years ago, they wanted to ban sodas.
Right.
The kids were getting obese. And they said, we're going to have a tax on sugary soft drinks, but no tax on the diet soda. And I thought, oh gosh, they're completely missing the point. So gluten-free doesn't necessarily mean it's healthier for you.
Yeah, no, not at all, because you can look on a gluten-free product and, like you were saying before, the shelf life, 60 days, you'll look at it and you won't understand half the ingredients that are on the ingredient list. So I stick to things that are healthy, whole grain, not a lot of processed food at all.
Okay.
But when I do, it is gluten-free.
And so the recipes in your book, Gluten Free My Recipe.
Yeah.
Complicated, simple, for the busy person on the go?
Busy person on the go. They're
Okay.
all under 500 calories. There's 30 recipes in here. There's a conversion guide, actually. So
Okay.
take an old recipe that you have, your grandmother's famous meatballs, take it, break it down, and I give you the step-by-step instructions to transfer it over to gluten-free.
Okay.
And then a shopping guide as well.
What kind of? Tell me about the shopping guide. What do you mean?
Oh, the shopping guide is in the back, and it's just some things that you should have in your pantry. On an occasion, maybe you come home late and you need to make a quick meal, so you'll have the low-sodium chicken broth or a gluten-free pasta that's healthy, some fresh vegetables, even frozen vegetables. I don't find any problems with frozen vegetables if that's the only ingredient in them. And things like that, so you can be ready to make a meal on the go.
And what about snacks? I mean, my biggest thing is late at night. I want to have a cookie. I want to have a handful of cookies. I fight the urge, and then I have them and then I immediately regret it. Do you do baking with the gluten-free? How does that work?
I do. There's you find a lot of problems with gluten-free baking because there's no really one flour that's gluten-free that does what regular all-purpose flour does that has gluten in it.
Okay.
It just doesn't bind the same, so you have to use a lot of different things like a xanthium gum or a guar gum, or a combination of different flours, depending on what you're making, a pastry, a cookie, a cake, what have you. But I actually have flour blends in here as well. For baking wise, one of my favorite things to make that's a dessert is actually homemade ice cream.
Okay.
So I'll use almond milk because I'm lactose intolerant. I'll use an unsweetened almond milk. I only get unsweetened coconut milks as well because you don't want the added sugar. There's really no need for it. And it's only 30 calories a cup. And I put that into an ice cube tray, a whole cup. Leave it in the freezer, make sure it freezes. Then I put it into a food processor with another quarter cup of almond milk with some xanthium gum, which is a natural thickener, and whatever flavoring you want. Maybe a powdered peanut butter, maybe some unsweetened cocoa powder, and whatever flavoring or pure extract you like in there, and then blend it until it's thick, and then you have ice cream.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that in the book or is that?
That's not in here. That's on my website, though.
All right, on your website. Give us your website.
That's glutenfreemyrecipe.com.
Okay.
Simple.
Because that's you come up with a gluten-free ice cream. That you got a friend in life for me. That's terrific. Let's talk a little bit about ordering gluten-free food in like in a bakery or a pizza place. I mean, what should you look for? What questions should you ask? How prevalent is it? Do you think more people should? We'll talk a little bit about ordering the food because I want to get back to who might really be better off if they were more gluten-free. But let's talk about going into, how convenient is it? Is it getting easier to order gluten-free food?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of places that you see are getting a full menu. If they don't, they're required to have an allergen menu.
They are?
I think most chain restaurants,
say
Applebee's or Fridays, they're going to have like an allergen menu.
Okay.
But places like Cheesecake Factory, they have a full book that's completely gluten-free menu.
Really?
Yeah, that's new. P.F. Chang's has a gluten-free menu. What I like that they do is they have different silverware and different plates that they use it on, because you'll go into a place and they'll say, oh, this dish is gluten-free, but you know what, it was just prepared next to a loaf of bread or a regular pasta. So then are you really getting a gluten-free product?
So the trend is towards gluten-free because they wouldn't add a whole separate menu for gluten-free if enough people.
It's so big now because of the increased amount of people with celiac disease, and people with celiac disease, they cannot have gluten, even an ounce of it. I was reading I think it's a biography of Elizabeth Hasselbeck, and she has celiac disease.
Okay.
She was talking about how a single crumb of bread touched her plate and she was violently ill for 3 days. So that the need for gluten-free for people with celiac disease and Crohn's disease and other autoimmune diseases like that is really, really important just for their health.
Do you think that's a manifestation of the processing that you were talking about? Because again, these are all diseases that really weren't they weren't in the vernacular 20, 30 years ago.
It could be, it could not be. Again, those books that I read do say that, but there's a flip side to the coin.
Well, it may also have been a case of people were getting sick, they didn't know why, and then you start prescribing drugs to mask why they're getting sick.
There can be so many things like that. But it's been shown that gluten-free can help kids with autism. I have a friend that works at an autistic school, and most of her students are on a gluten-free diet, and they see improvement. So it could be the processed wheat, it could be the overuse of processed foods itself, but it is showing that eliminating the gluten is doing a positive thing.
And let's talk a little bit about weight loss. Okay, you make the decision, you're going to try to be as gluten-free as possible. You buy the book or you learn how to cook. Somebody struggling, they're exercising but they're not losing weight. How does gluten-free or how does not eating gluten or eliminating it from your lifestyle, how does that help you with your weight loss?
It doesn't necessarily,
Okay.
unless you're doing it in a healthy way. For me, I don't like to follow the big diet fads or things like that, Atkins or Weight Watchers or things like that, just because everyone's different and you can't really pinpoint what someone's going to react to and what someone's going to lose weight from. So, there's a paleo diet, which is, grain-free, dairy-free, it's all just regular grass-fed meats and vegetables and fruits, and then there's vegan, there's vegetarian, there's all different things that you can do, low carb, low fat. It's about finding what's good for you and then working on that so you can have your own weight loss.
I cringe when I hear the word diet because it's really habits. It's not diet. But I was thinking more of if you're struggling with your weight and you're going on these diets and God help me, if I see somebody eating a lean cuisine with a diet soda, I just want to cry.
No, there's so much sodium in that. Please, no.
It's criminal. No, seriously, it's a $1 billion industry, and they're scamming people because they're making the sacrifices and they're eating a little portion of food and they think they're doing the right thing, but it's really just exasperating the situation. So what I was trying to get at, I guess, was rather than go on a diet, quote unquote diet, if you incorporate or at least become more aware of the role something like gluten plays in what you eat, can that help you maybe lose a few pounds that have been tricky to get rid of?
I think it will, especially since people will initially think that gluten is, these pastas, these breads, and so forth. So eliminating those and giving them whole grains or quinoa, millet, any gluten-free grain, buckwheat. I think that's better off than having regular white pasta. Just swapping out like white pasta for wild rice or something of that nature.
Well, let's talk about pasta a little bit because I love pasta. I love a good pasta salad. I love a well-made pasta with a sauce. And that was one of the things that went bye-bye when I was like, okay, I really got to cut down on my processed foods, and I miss it. You make your own. There's a pasta recipe in there, and you talked about penne alla vodka. Walk us through that.
Penne alla vodka. There's a recipe that my mom made when I was little, and she doesn't put any vodka in it, so we always used to call it penne alla vodka-less.
Okay.
Because she was just out of vodka one day, and she was like, "I'm going to whip it up, without it." I made it where I use a whole a gluten-free penne, so it's made from quinoa. Those are one of the pastas that I like, made from quinoa or beans.
Okay.
The ones made.
What's quinoa? Because I've been eating it every Sunday for the past 2 months. I can't even say it.
Quinoa is a small grain. It's gluten free and it's very high in protein. So that's why it's a big buzzword right now.
Right,
It's a superfood.
Yeah.
So I use a pasta made from quinoa, and I use coconut creamer instead of regular light cream or heavy cream, which I would normally use, and then a homemade gluten-free marinara sauce, low sodium. I don't put sugar in it.
Okay.
And I do use extra virgin olive oil or coconut oil. And this one, it's coconut oil to go with the coconut creamer. But not a lot of butter. If I do use butter, I do use a vegan butter.
But the butter is better than the margarine, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's another thing that makes me cringe. Oh, yeah, don't worry, I'm using margarine. No, I'm not eating it.
No, That's the same thing along the lines of the diet soda and the lean cuisine. It's told to you and advertised to you that it's healthy, but it's really not.
And you mentioned earlier turkey chili. You have a recipe, that's your favorite recipe?
Yeah, that is my favorite
Talk to us a little
recipe.
bit about your turkey chili recipe.
That's just one that I made one day out of just the stuff I had in the house. I do that a lot with recipes, so I had a package.
Well, that's the whole history of chilies. Like you don't have enough for any one meal, you just throw it all together. Right.
So a can of tomatoes, crushed tomatoes. A lot of crushed tomatoes actually have gluten in them, so just read the packaging. Crushed tomatoes, extra lean ground turkey.
If you're looking at a can of crushed tomatoes, how do you know if there's gluten in there?
Well, I use ones that will say gluten-free.
Okay.
There's a lot of products that on the front it'll say gluten-free.
And if it says gluten-free on the front, it's okay?
Yeah, it should be. It should be. Especially since the FDA is making such strict guidelines and rules about saying gluten on there. A few months ago, they made a rule that anything saying like free of gluten, no gluten, or gluten-free, they actually have to make those, reach those guidelines before they can put that on their product.
Terrific.
Yeah.
All right, so we talked about the ice cream, we talked about the turkey chili, we talked about the gluten-free pizza. Was there one other thing that we were supposed to bring up, or I think we covered it?
I think we covered that all.
All right, the website is
glutenfreemyrecipe.com.
Glutenfreemyrecipe.com.
Yep. MC Nav.
Thank you very much. Oh, real quick. the cooking, the recipes you talked about, they're simple to make. Anybody?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
This is a starter guide for me. It's a step-by-step conversion guide, so any beginner that's gluten-free or not.
And anybody's hard pressed for time, they work all day to get home, it's not a big deal.
Yes.
Okay.
Should be perfect for them.
That's terrific. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for
you, Michael.
explaining
Thanks
all
for
that
having me
stuff
on.
about gluten-free cooking. It's fascinating, and I just hope really more and more people start eating healthier, because we got a weight problem in this country.
We do.
It's very daunting.
Yes.
This has been another episode of Mr. Long Island's Search for Truth and Beauty. This week we got both. We got truth and beauty. MC, thank you very much for your
Thank you.
time. And thank you for your time, and look forward to seeing you next week.